Greetings, brothers and sisters. Welcome to another video. Today is the 6th of July 2025, and it's about 20 past 8 in the evening here in South Africa. A real winter's evening, right in the middle of winter, and yeah, it's been pretty cold. Missed the warm sunny days. We're not used to this cold weather here. It's been a while since I put a video out. I think it's at least about 5 months, and yeah, I've been pretty much off the grid, so to speak, for the last 2 months or so. I was led. I felt in my spirit that I needed to just get away from social media and get away from listening to teachings and that from various channels that I've been following, and just to spend some time in the Word and with the Lord. Yeah, just absolutely just waiting on the Lord, working, just trying to bring, put bread on the table and keeping things going. And in between, just waiting on the Lord and trying to hear His voice, hear this still voice without influence from various sources. Yes, I've been keeping an eye on the news to some extent, trying to keep out of the controversial stuff, and just keeping an eye on things. So watching the events in the Middle East. With a keen eye, and recognizing some of the connections to the prophecies for the end times, in particular the prophecies of Daniel, Daniel's chapters 7 and 8, I believe, are the events that we have been seeing and will continue to see as that great and awesome day approaches. So I thought, I've been debating whether to do another video, and I decided to do it because this week is particularly a very, very exciting week for me. I believe with all my heart that we're in the third month still. We're in the second week. We're approaching the 15th day of the third month, Feast of Weeks, on what I believe to be the true calendar, a true biblical calendar. And so yeah, I think some very interesting things are going to happen this week. And so I just thought, well, let me try and make some connections to Daniel and to the Word, and maybe just highlight a couple of these things, and we can, whether it happens this week or not, it may be another year. It may not even be this year. I believe that everything that's in me that it will see the beginning of the taking of the bride and the beginning of the tribulation in this year, but there is a possibility that we've got another year to go. With the things that are happening around the Middle East, I think it's highly unlikely that we'll end up going another year. But then we've been saying that for the last couple of years, so events somehow just seem to the clock, the wheels of time and the wheels of events just seem to go a lot slower than what we would like to see it happening. But they'll happen, and as they happen, we can just make those connections back to the Word. And so that's what I want to be able to do. I'm probably going to call this video "The Signs of the Times," or "Watching the Times," or something along those sort of lines. So I'm going to go into. I want to start off with Daniel, Daniel's prophecy. I believe what I believe to be probably the most important prophecy in the Bible, Daniel's 70 weeks, and just touch on that and how that is connected to the big sign, connected to Israel, the people coming back into their land for 70 years. And I've done a fairly detailed study on Daniel's 70 weeks in the interpretation of the 490 years, which led to which it was a prophecy basically from Daniel's day, from the year in which Cyrus decreed the rebuilding of the temple and Jerusalem in his first year, exactly 483 years to the baptism of Jesus Christ in 29 AD. And I've done a couple of videos, I mentioned it a few times before, that we have a biblical chronology that gives us an exact timing of events. We can know when the events occurred in which year, all the way from Adam and Eve, all the way through to the baptism of Jesus in 29 AD. And so that was work that was done by Reverend Martin Anstey. I've done a couple of videos on that. And so based on that study, 29 AD was the year in which Jesus was baptized, and it was the year, it was the point in time where he declared the Jubilee in having read Isaiah 61. And so the Jubilee, we know, according to what Jesus declared, as recorded in Luke chapter 4, that the Jubilee year was in the year 30 AD. So we can know where the next Jubilee is just by counting the cycle of 49 from 30 AD. We know that the next Jubilee will begin in the fall of 2038 and will be complete by the fall of 2039. I believe with everything that is in me, that is a correct understanding. We've got a second witness. We know that Jesus was baptized in the year in which Tiberius Caesar was in his 15th year of his reign. We know that he began his reign in 14 AD. So his 15th year would have been 29 AD. So we have two witnesses that are really pointing to the Jubilee being in from the fall of 29 AD to the fall of 30 AD. So I do believe with everything in my heart that we know where we are, and that this year we are in the first year of the two final sets of 7 to complete the current Jubilee cycle that we're in. So we've got basically 14 years left of this current Jubilee cycle, and we're in that first year. That first year of the second set of 7 would have began in last year in the fall of 2024, and we can see a harvest again. So in the first year, we're following the Shemitah cycles, the cycle in which the Israelites were permitted to farm and to harvest for 6 years, and in the 7th year they had to let the land rest, and then the cycle would start again, and that cycle would occur for 7 times, and then there would be a Jubilee year. And so we know that the Lord works in that agricultural cycle. We know that the Daniel prophecy of 70 weeks, 70 Shabuah, is based on the 7-year agricultural cycle. So there can be no breaking it up, as the church teaches, where they teach that 69 of the 70 weeks have occurred 2,000 years ago, and that we're just waiting for the final 70th week. That's absolute nonsense. You can't break up as a cycle of you can't break up a Shemitah cycle. You can't break up a Jubilee cycle, and the prophecy was built around a Jubilee, the Jubilee cycle, running from the fall, based on northern hemisphere, basically running from the fall to the fall. So that's the Shemitah cycle, and that's what we're watching now. So we're in that first year. We're in the year that would have probably been the most exciting year in the cycle, having not been able to harvest the previous year. So there would have been a rest. They would have been eating from their storerooms for the period of 2 years, the 6th and the 7th year. And finally, they would be just about, at this point in time, they would be harvesting their first year of the next 7-year cycle. So I'd imagine they would be pretty excited, and that's where I believe we're at now. We're about to see the harvesting of the first fruits unto the Lord. Revelations 14, we were about to see the 144,000, the first fruits unto the Lord, unto the Father, and to the Lamb, which is about to be taken. And I believe with everything in my heart, it's all connected to the Feast of Weeks, the first fruits of the wheat harvest. That's where we're at now. And the first fruits of the wheat harvest, Feast of Weeks, unequivocally, is on the 15th day of the third month. If you count the weeks correctly, according to Leviticus 23, we know that we are supposed to count seven Sabbaths. After the Passover is completed, we count 7 Sabbaths, and then we will, if we count it correctly, we'll get to the 15th day of the third month, and then the Feast of Weeks would be the 16th day of the third month. And that would be the same day that the Israelites, that the Lord came down on Mount Sinai. And it would be the same day that he entered into his covenant with Abraham. It would be the same day that he entered into his covenant with Jacob. And I believe with everything in me that that was the same day that he entered into covenant with Noah, when the first rainbow was appeared in the skies. It based on the timing of the story, we're not given the exact number of days after Noah left the ark to when he made a sacrifice on the altar. He had time obviously to build a sacrifice and prepare. And I think it was having come out of the ark on the 27th day of the second month. I believe it's very likely that he made that covenant that the Lord made the covenant with him on the 15th day or the 16th day of the third month, covenant day. So we've seen over and over again that the 15th, 16th day of the third month is a very, very important day in the event. I think it's probably the most important day in the Lord's calendar. I believe I can prove beyond any shadow of a doubt from Scripture that Jesus was born on the 15th/16th day of the third month. We know that Isaac was born on the 15th, 16th day of the third month, and we know that Isaac was a type of Jesus. And we know that Judah was also born on the 15th, 16th day of the third month. So there's a lot of connections, a lot of things are pointing to this very important day. I love the numbers as well, because it'll be 15:3. And when you look at the story in John 21, where the Lord, when he had appeared at the Sea of Galilee, the disciples, it would be the third time that he appeared to them, and that was the last time that he appeared to them in that form. And I believe with everything in me, based on the accounts, it was probably that event happened on his birthday in the 15th, 16th day of the third month, and he had a meal with him. And that was the day that they caught the 150 great fish in the net, and the net never broke. That number 153 is a very important number. I just saw a video not too long ago. I can't remember the chap's name. He goes into a lot of the searching. He's searching for number patterns in the scriptures, and he found that when he searched the name Peter, the name Peter, just the straight word name Peter in the King James version, which I believe is the most accurate translation, and I believe the one that's been blessed by the Lord for us. When you search the name Peter, it occurs 100, I think you said 158 times, but in 153 verses. And when you search the name Paul, it occurs 157 times, but also in 153 verses. So just an interesting pattern that we've seen coming over, and we see that both, Paul and Peter were connected to the gospel. The one was Paul was connected to the gospel unto the Gentiles, and of course Peter was connected to the gospel unto the Jews. So there's a fish connection to both Peter and Paul in terms of the gospel. 153 is about the gospel. It's all about the gospel, and I think it's pointing to the 15:3 in the date, the 15th day of the third month. And so we're coming up to that very fast. Let me just get this out the way here. But I've got a calendar here that we're looking at the moment. This would be This would be the sun, moon, the calendar based on the sun, moon, and stars. So, to understand what I'm saying with regards to what I believe to be the true biblical calendar, I would highly recommend that you have a look at a study that I did, which is called "Unscrambling the Calendars," and this it's a study that I've got I've got a folder in on the Google Drive, and I will put a link in the description of this video where I'll just put a link to the whole folder and all my studies that I've done over the last 7 or 8 years are in that drive, and this one goes into detail as to why I believe why I believe that the current biblical calendar that I'm presenting is the true and correct biblical calendar, based entirely on what the scriptures have to say. The scriptures are very clear, that without getting into too much detail, that the first day of the month is a new moon day, and then the second day would be the first working day, and you'd work for 6, and the seventh would be rest, which would mean that the seventh day of the week of the first week falls on the 8th day of the month, and then the cycle begins again. You work 6, and then the 7th day of the second week would fall on the 15th day of the month, and then the third Sabbath would fall on the 22nd day, and the fourth Sabbath would fall on the 29th day of the month. And then we watch and wait for the Lord to show us when the new beginning of the month is. And without a shadow of a doubt, the new beginning of the month is the dark moon, the first bit of light coming on. It is the beginning of the new month. And so that follows the pattern of everything in nature. We have one creator, and that pattern is used over and over again. Everything begins from something really small, from a seed, and it grows into its full bloom, and then ultimately fades away to nothing again. We see it in our own lives. We see it in the lives of animals, in the lives of plants. We see it in the lives of in the pattern of everything. It goes from small to full bloom and back to nothing again. And that's the way the cycle of the moon works. The beginning of the month starts with small, grows to full bloom, and then fades away to nothing again. It's the same pattern over and over again. Also, we know that without a shadow of a doubt that the Israelites departed out of Egypt in the middle of the month. And I can assure you, God's a practical God, and He's a loving God, and He would not have sent them out in the darkness when you can't see your hand in front of your face. For anybody who lives in the city doesn't understand this, but when you go out in the country and you switch off the lights, you literally cannot see the hand in front of your face in the darkness. And yet on a full moon, or even that week before full moon and that week after, you can actually take a walk. You can actually walk in the field without falling over your feet. And for sure, when they left Egypt in the middle of the month, they left when when the moon was giving them some light. So without a shadow of a doubt, we know that the cycle of the moon is the full moon is the middle of the month, which starts on the new moon would be the dark moon. The big debate, of course, is when is the beginning of the year, and that is something that I believe that has been rather obscure, and I believe it's all to do with the name Abib. We know that in the Bible, the first month is the month of Abib, and the Jews would have us believe, and many would have us believe, that that's got to do with the barley, the ripe barley in Israel, to mark the beginning of the year. And I seriously challenge that. Noah, for example, had no cooking clue. There was no barley. He was on a boat. The world was covered with water. There was no barley to observe where he was, where the beginning of the year was, etc. He knew exactly where it was based on the sun, moon, and stars. Just like Genesis 1 verse 14 says to us that the calendar is based on the sun, moon, and stars. So we know that the moon really rules the months. The sun rules the cycle of the days, and I believe with everything in me, the stars rule the cycle of the years. It's when the year begins, and each month is covered by a particular picture. In the case of the beginning of the year, I believe it is that the constellation that we are to look for is Virgo. And this is where I think we've come unstuck. Well, I did for a very long time. We've always been looking for which constellation the sun is in. And we talk about the sun being in a particular constellation for the beginning of the year. And I think we've been actually looking at it incorrectly. We should be looking at, you can't see what constellation the sun is in. When you look into the sun, even at sunset, you cannot see what constellation the sun is in. You have to look you got to look at sunset. You got to look east and have a look at which constellations have risen in the east. Which, as it gets darker, the stars have become visible, and you need to have a look at which constellation are visible, and that would be the picture for the month. So when the Lord said to Moses in Exodus, "This moon is the first of your moons," we have no idea what the marker was for Moses to know how to distinguish that particular new moon from any of the others. And I believe it was so common to them to understand it that the marker was the stars. What constellation? He saw that as the sun set, the moon was, of course, with the sun at the point in time. That would have been a dark night, and he would have looked to say, okay, what constellation am I seeing in the east? And he would have seen the constellation Virgo, and in particular, Speaker would be particularly prominent. And the word speaker, or the name speaker in Latin, means grain head, or head of grain. And the word Abib means the same thing, head of grain. So I believe that Abib and speaker are one and the same thing. So when we talk about the first month being the month of Abib, we're talking about the first month being the month when the star Speaker, or Abib, rises in the east. And the sun would be in a particular constellation. Now, this is something I don't want to digress too much on this, but I do want to just highlight this, and I encourage you, I hope that this will encourage you to go and have a look at this study to see for yourself how interesting it really is. If we go back, this is some stills in that study. I just want to have a look at that. And if we have a look, we're seeing in the year 4000 BC, so we're talking 6,000 years ago. That was at the time of creation. And if we put that, now, just a word on for some people that have an issue with a program like Stellarium, and they say, well, it's a pagan thing. It's not. It's a mathematical calculation that shows the exact position of the sun, moon, and stars in a particular year. The cycles are so exact, are so mathematically accurate, that we can calculate their positions going back thousands of years or going forward thousands of years. So all we're doing in a program like Stellarium, and there are various others, is really just making a graphical representation of those calculations. Okay, so when we show for a particular date, and we put Virgo in the east, and you can do this for any position around the world. It doesn't have to be in Israel. You can be wherever you are in the world. Put Virgo on the horizon for a particular year, and that would be the beginning of the year. Now it's interesting. In 6,000 years ago, have a look at where the sun was. So this picture here is a sunset picture. Okay, the sun is setting, and we would be able to see Virgo there, Speaker. We'd be able to see Speaker in particular, and we see that at that point, in that time, the sun was actually in Taurus. Okay, now that's interesting because that has changed, but there's one thing that hasn't changed. Okay, so if we move forward to Moses' time. Moses' time would have been in the year about 1500 BC. Okay, and in his time, so when the Lord said to you, "This month is the first of your months," I believe with everything in me, Moses saw Speaker on the horizon. So when you put Speaker on the horizon in the east, and at sunset, obviously for the beginning of when the sun and the moon are together, there's the sun and the moon together. Okay, sun and the moon together. At sunset, we see Speaker on the horizon, and in Moses' day, we see that the sun is no longer in Taurus. So even though speaker is in the same place, the sun is now in Aries. It was in Adam's day, it was in Taurus, but in Moses' day, it's now moved. Even though the picture of Virgo and speaker is the same, the sun has moved positions. It's telling us a story. It started off in Taurus and then it's moved into, and now it's moving, and this is called the precession. It moves about 30 days every 2,000 years. Okay. If we go to a date now at the time when Jesus was crucified, around we can. I know that it's 33 AD, but for those that believe it 32 or whatever, it doesn't. These things don't change much. It takes thousands of years for the change, so the picture will be the same. If we put speaker on the eastern horizon, when the sun and the moon just on that, as the sun and moon are coming into constellation at sunset, we see now that in Jesus's day, the sun was actually heading into Pisces, so it was on the border of Aries going into Pisces. And this was the transition period going in for the following 2,000 years that we've just lived. So it started off in Taurus, moved into Aries for the time from Abraham through to Jesus, and then it's moved from Jesus to our time. It's been in Pisces, but the picture that remains the same for the start of the year is speaker is on the horizon. Okay, so if we go now to just as an example, 2022, this is the time when I did the study, and you put speaker on the horizon again, and then we see that now the sun has moved now fully into Pisces for the same start. Sun and the moon in constellation, and we see that the sun has now moved all the way from Adam's day in Taurus through Aries now into Pisces, and this will continue. The next position will be heading into Aquarius. So obviously there's a story to this whole thing. The sun is busy telling us a story, going from Taurus, the beginning, through the ram, the sacrificial, the time when Jesus was crucified, into the time of the church, and then of course we're going into the time of Aquarius, the pouring out of the time of the Holy Spirit will be pouring out new life and into the millennial reign. So that's where we're heading. But the one thing that remains the same for the beginning of the year is that Abib, speaker, must be on the horizon for the start of the year. So with that rule in place, we've basically put these calendars together. It's what I've termed it the Sun, Moon, and Stars calendar, based on Aries stroke speaker. Aries, because the sun was in Aries at the time of Jesus' crucifixion. That's a very important thing. And then, of course, it's now I adjusted my calendar so that for the beginning of the year, we have speaker on the eastern horizon. So with that adjusted, this year actually started on the 28th of April, based on those rules. So we are currently in the third month. Today is the 6th. It's Sunday, the 6th of July, and we're in the third month, and we're just a few days away from the 15th of the third month, which would be Jesus' birthday, and it would be Feast of Weeks, Feast of New Grain. The first fruits of the wheat harvest would begin. This is where the harvest of the wheat would just begin in this time period of a year. So that's just a little bit on the calendars. I will touch again a little bit later on the calendars and how and some of the things that it links into Daniel. But now I want to go into Daniel and just have a look at the 70 weeks and just talk a little bit about how that connects to Israel and where we are now with Israel. And why it is that, well, let's have a look at it. Daniel, you'll remember I said to you, Daniel's the most important prophecy, I believe, and it was telling us two things. One, it told us exactly from Daniel's time to the exact year in which Jesus was baptized and the beginning of his ministry. But there's also an end time prophecy which is based on 70 years, and it's all to do with this word weeks, or more correctly, Shabua. Shabua. H7620, the word is Shabua, which really means seven, period of seven, or a group of seven, but it also means Feast of Weeks. So it's the name for a particular feast, Feast of Weeks, Shabua, and I want to show that to you. So Daniel said, 70 Shabua are determined upon thy people. So that Shabua can be 77s, which is, for the first translation, would be 70 times 7, which is 490 years. But in the end times, it's 70 Shabua, which would be 70 Feast of Weeks, are determined upon thy people and upon the holy city, and for a certain group of things to happen. So what are the things that need to happen based on this time period that's allocated? Is that it's to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins. So it's basically being a close to evil, or an end to evil, and to make reconciliation for iniquity. So this word is reconciliation or atonement for sins or evil. That word can also, 5771 can mean evil. You can have a look at that for yourself. So this is exactly what Jesus did. So 70 Shabua, 70 times 7, 490 years were allocated to the people up until the time when Jesus came and did these first two things, where where the time of transgression came to an end, and the making an end, or making a closure for sins. Okay, his crucifixion on the cross. And he went on into, now we're looking at, it goes on into to bring in the everlasting righteousness, that hasn't happened yet, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, that hasn't happened yet, and to anoint the Most Holy. The Most Holy here would be Jesus, to anoint him as King. That hasn't happened yet. So these things so this is partly fulfilled, this prophecy is partly fulfilled for the first understanding of Feast of Weeks, the 490 years, where Jesus was crucified in the middle of the last week. So he was baptized at the 483rd year, and 3.5 years later, in the middle of the final 7, he was crucified. Exactly. So 483rd year would have been in the year 29 AD, and he was crucified in the year 33 AD. So exactly 3.5 years after he was baptized, and exactly in the middle of the week, as we will see, was prophesied would happen. But then, of course, what I want to focus on now is the end time understanding of the same prophecy. So, and then it goes on to say, now know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem. Now, in the first interpretation, that would have been Cyrus's decree to restore and build Jerusalem. From then unto the Messiah, that's unto when Jesus became Messiah, which would have been his baptism, the beginning of his ministry. The prince shall be, now it's 7 weeks. Seven in the original interpretation was 7 times 7, which is 49 years plus. This is multiple. This is the Hebrew word here is multiple 6, which is interpreted as 60. Okay, this word 60 is an Old English word, but the original Hebrew is multiple 6. So it would be 10 times 60. It's 60 and 2. So 60 and 2 years or weeks of years. So that would be a total of 483 up to here. And then the streets and shall be built again, and the walls there in troublous times. So and then it goes on to say that after the 60 and 2, Messiah will be cut off, not for himself, that's crucified, but not for himself. And the people of the prince shall come and destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be as a flood, unto the end thereof desolations are determined. And it goes on to say that he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, or in 1 week. So in the middle of that final week of 7, he will confirm a covenant with many, not with all. And we see that over and over in the Gospels. Go check it out. Jesus did not die for all. He died on the cross for many. And in the midst of that week, he shall cause the sacrifice of an oblation to cease. So, in other words, the need for the sacrifice of sins, the sin sacrifice was brought to an end in the middle of that week, which was exactly 3.5 years after he was baptized. So that's, and you shall make it and then for the overspring of abomination he shall make it desolate even unto the consummation, and that determined shall be poured out upon the desolate. Okay, so I go into a lot more detail of this in a study that I did, which you're welcome. It'll be in that folder as well. It's Daniel's 70 weeks in terms of the was, the is, and the is to come, understanding it. And so I've spent a fair amount of time putting this, and I've revised it recently to bring it up to date. It goes into the detail of what I've just been explaining to you with regards to the two ways to interpret Daniel's 70 weeks. Okay, so have a look at that study and check it out for yourself. There are scriptural references in every instance. There is a last bit which I'm not going to go into now, but you can have a look at it. There is a little bit of maybe interpretation there on my part, just for in terms of the of some things that are in Revelations. But you please have a look at that and get into the detail of Daniel's 70 weeks. Okay, so I just now going back into the same prophecy from a 70 Shabuah, 70 years, 70 Shabuah. This is for end times understanding. So let's have a look at the same prophecy now again for that, and we need to we read exactly the same prophecy, but with the eyes of understanding that it's 70 Shabuah, 70 years. Okay, so sorry, 9:24. Let me just go to 9:24. First thing I want to show you that this is not just a dream of mine, that this Shabuah, Feast of Weeks, this H7620. Okay, if we search and see what was this word used for, this Shabuah. We saw that it was Shabuah, okay, Shabuah. And if we just search for that, by the way, this app I'm actually using. I'm operating from. This is on my phone at the moment, so I'm using Microsoft's phone link, and this is an app that I love. I use it the most for my Bible studies. Of course, there is this eSword, which I also use. It's PC based. It's also a very powerful tool to look at and for Bible study. But this one that's called My Sword, and it's available. Unfortunately, it's no longer available on Play Store. It's no longer available on. You have to install it manually from the website. It is a trustworthy site. Just have a look for My Sword. So I love this app, and I find it to be very powerful. So I just want to use this app to as a reference. This, of course, is using the King James, where every word is numbered, and the numbers are given to us in the New Testament as G numbers and in the Old Testament as H numbers. So if we just go and search for that word H7620, okay, H7620. Let's just do that in the entire Bible, and we see that it occurs 17 times, 17 verses. So it might occur more than once in a particular verse, but it occurs in 17 verses. And the very first time it appears, the very first use, and the first use of a word is always, I find, to be particularly interesting and I believe important to understand. And the first time that this word is used is in the story of Jacob, where he goes to Laban. Excuse me. He goes to Laban, and he sees Rachel, and he falls in love with Rachel, and he enters into a covenant with Laban to work for her as a wife 7 years. And And then we know from the story that after having worked 7 years, so he worked the full 7 years, and in the eighth year, he would have received his wife. Okay. And we don't know exactly when in the year it happened, but I think when we look at these words, we'll get an idea that it was very close to the Feast of Weeks. Anyway, he had now got, this is the story of Genesis 29 to 27. He had now received his first wife, and he then discovered that Laban had deceived him, and he had actually received his wife Leah, the sister of Rachel. And it wasn't actually for Leah that he worked; he was working for Rachel, and he felt aggrieved. He felt very aggrieved by that, and Laban then says to him, "Fulfill her week, fulfill her Shabuah, and we will give you thee also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet 7 other years." And so he has to fulfill Leah's Shabuah, and then he would receive Rachel, and then he would work another 7 years. So he's worked 7. In the eighth year, he receives Leah, and he sees her week through her Shabuah, and then he receives Rachel. And it goes on to, in the next verse, it's used for the second time now, that word, H7620, Shabuah. And Jacob did so and fulfilled her Shabuah, and he, that's Laban, gave him Rachel, his daughter, to wife also. Okay, so that's the second occurrence, and the third occurrence of that word in the Bible is in Exodus 34:22. It's concerning the Feast of Weeks, and it goes on to say, "Thou shalt observe the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Shabuah, the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the Feast of Ingathering at the year's end." So you'll observe these two feasts. The one is the Feast of Shabuah, which is the first fruits of the wheat harvest. So the Feast of Shabuah, the Feast of Weeks, is in the middle of at the beginning of the wheat harvest. And as I mentioned, I believe with everything in terms of the counts, it's if you count the calendar and just do a quick count there. So if after the Passover, if you count 7 Sabbaths after the Passover, so you don't count that one, you've got first fruits, and then you count, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The seventh Sabbath, and the next day is Feast of Weeks, and that's a Feast of Shabuah, and that'll be the 16th day of the third month, and that would be so let's just go there. So we see that we are to observe the Feast of Shabuah, the first fruits of the wheat harvest, at that. So that's the third occurrence of this word. So we see clearly Daniel's prophecy when he says 70 Shabuah. You can also understand it as 70 Feast of Weeks. 70 Feast of Weeks are determined. Let's go back to Daniel. So we read it in that context. 70 Feast of Weeks are determined upon thy people. That would be 70 years upon thy people and upon the holy city, to finish transgression and to make an end of sins. Okay, that's the understanding in the is. They've gone through another set of transgression and sins in these last 70 years. To make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and anoint the most holy. So none of these things happen again, but we've now have a new set of cycles, a new time to look for the coming of the Messiah, because it goes on to say, to know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem, that'll be the new one that has to happen again for the new trigger in the end time understanding unto the Messiah. So from this commandment that will happen again, which is after the 70 weeks this time. So we have the 70 Shabuah, the 70 Feast of Weeks. Then we're going to have a commandment to restore Jerusalem. And then from there we'll have, so from that commandment unto Messiah will be 7 Shabuah, that's 7 years, and multiple 6, and 2 Shabuah. So multiple 6 and 2 Shabuah. So it's 7 multiple 6 and 2. And I believe that in the end time understanding, where the first time around was the multiple was 10, I believe in these end time understanding the multiple is 1. So it'll be 7 Shabuah, 6 and 2 Shabuah. So that's a total of 15 Shabuah. Now that's an interesting, because we know the end times is 14 years. Why is Daniel talking about 15 Shabuah, okay, from the commandment to the coming of Messiah and to complete all of these things, okay, will be, to complete all these things that he spoke about will be 15 Shabuah. And this was something that I've in the past I've tried to understand, but until it suddenly dawned on me. For a 14-year, if it has to start with a Shabuah and end with a Shabuah, then 14 years will be exactly right. Because if you've got 14 years and it starts on a Feast of Weeks and it ends on a Feast of Weeks, you will have a total of 15 Feast of Weeks in a 14-year cycle. So it starts with the Feast of Weeks, the 14 starts on a Feast of Weeks, and it ends on a Feast of Weeks, and there's 14 years, it has to have 15 Feast of Weeks. That's what Daniel was talking about here. And I believe with everything that is in me right now, the whole story, this whole thing has to start on Feast of Weeks, on the Shabuah. There has to be 15 Shabuah. Let me just take you to a chart that I'm going to try and demonstrate this, because I think this is fairly important to see. Let me just see. I did open. Okay. This is. I'm going to go to the. Yeah, I think it's in this Daniel study. There's a chart here that I'm going to refer to. Okay. Let me just zoom in that a little bit. Try and make it as big as possible. Okay. So if we are saying 14, we know that end times understanding is 14 years, right? But I'm actually wondering if this is really, no, I think that actually might be easier to explain it on this one. Yeah, okay. Let me go through this chart quickly. This was just very briefly. We know the end time understanding is a 21-year story. Okay, so it's based on that same story of Jacob. Jacob having gone to work 7 years for his wives, and in the 8th year he receives his first wife and his second wife in the 8th year, and then he works another 7. He works another 7. So he works 7 and then another 7, and then he works 6 for the cattle. And then he enters into a covenant with Laban. So we see that pattern, and we see a similar pattern in the flood story, in Noah's releasing of the doves. We see a similar 21 day pattern. This is a 21-year pattern in Jacob's story, and it's all pointing to a 21-year cycle for the time of the end. So we're seeing that we have a 7-year lead up to the final 14 years. Then we have the final 14 years, which is split into 2 parts. The first 7 years for the time of seals, and the second 7 years for the time of trumpets. But so what I recognized is that the 21-year cycle actually fits into a 21-day cycle of a month as well. And we know that, for example, the 7th seal is the time of rest. So that's speaking of a Sabbath. And so we know that there's clearly a pattern that's related to the cycle of a typical week. Six working days and the day of rest, and then 6 working days, day of rest, and so on. And so that's what I try to depict in this. In a typical month, you've got a new moon day, and then you've got 6 working days, and the Sabbath day, the 7th day would be on the 8th day of the month. Then you've got another 6 working days, and then the Sabbath day on the 15th day of the month, and then another 6 working days, and the Sabbath day on the 22nd day of the month. Okay, that's the same pattern that we see in these end times. We've seen a lead up in the last 7 years of Holy Spirit preparation for this time that we're about to go into in the time of tribulation. Okay, it all started in 2017. At the time of we recognized around September 2017. We know many people know about the Revelation 12 sign, and a lot of people came to wake up and started really getting into end time understanding at about that time. So we've seen, and that's been going on now for 7 years to where we are at. We are at this point in time. We're in this line over here between April and October 2025. Okay, so we're in the first year. We're in the first day of the next of next week or the next 7 year cycle. Okay, we're getting in year one from the 14 year cycle. So from year one to the 14 years, and the 15th year is the Jubilee and the final restoration. Or in the 2021 picture story, it's 21 years, and then the 22nd year would be the Jubilee year. Okay, so if we have a look at that, so I'm just trying to orientate you to the chart. So we've gone through the first 7 years of preparation. This would be the equivalent of Jacob working 7 years. Okay, and then receiving his wife in the 8th year. Okay, then he worked another 7 years. Okay, and then he worked another 6 years, and then he entered into a covenant in the 21st year. Okay, into a covenant, which is exactly what Jesus will do as well. The final covenant that he makes will be in this year, before entering into the millennial reign and becoming king and in his kingdom. So we see that we got this the same the cycle, and that's what we're really trying to depict here. We're at this point in time. We're in the beginning of by the way, these would be the final 3 sets of 7 to the next Jubilee. The next Jubilee would be from the fall of 2038, from the fall of 2038 to the fall of 2039. That would be the next Jubilee. Okay, so we've got 3 sets of 7 to get there. We've completed the third last set of 7. And we've got 2 more to go, and we're in the first year, and harvest can start again. This is a harvest year. This last year was a non-harvest year. No harvesting can happen, but it's interesting. I think it is in Exodus. I think it's 23, if I recall correctly. Exodus. Let me just find it quickly. Okay, it was in Exodus 23:11, and it's talking about this cycle of 6 years. Thou shalt sow thy land and gather in the fruits, but in the 7th year thou shalt let it rest and lie, and so you don't do a harvest. So you'll gather in the fruits, you'll harvest in the 6th year, in those 6 years of planting and reaping, but in the 7th year you let it rest. But the interesting thing is here, but who's allowed to eat of that? The poor. That the poor of thy people may eat. And what they leave, the beasts of the field shall eat. Isn't that interesting? That's just something that I never really picked up on it before, and it dawned on me. In the 7th, there's no harvesting allowed, okay? But the poor are allowed to go into the field and eat. And whatever's left of them, you can send your beasts in to eat. So there's no harvesting, but that doesn't mean what grows of its own can't be eaten, according to Exodus 23:11. Isn't that interesting? So there's no harvesting in the 7th year, but the poor are allowed to eat. It reminds me of that story when Jesus went into the field with the disciples, and they plucked off ears of wheat, and they crushed them in the hands, and they were eating. And then, of course, the Pharisees come and challenge them about not eating without having washed their hands, and or on the Sabbath, etc. And but it's just interesting that the poor are allowed in the 7th year. The poor are allowed to eat of that what comes up of its own, And it was my understanding before that nothing was to be eaten of that, of what comes up of its own. I think it's based on the wording that's in Leviticus 23. And that led me to believe that absolutely nothing was to be eaten of that harvest, including the animals. But that's not entirely correct. According to Exodus 23:11, the poor and the beasts can go and eat of it. And I think that's got something to do. Who's the poor? In end time understanding, the poor shall inherit the earth. We're talking about, that's this last group, this group that goes into the millennial reign. They will inherit the earth. And that last seventh, that eating of what comes up of its own in that seventh year has got something to do with this seventh year with regards to the poor that inherit the earth. Okay, but in any case, let's just get back to it. We see that 7 years. We saw that in that cycle. Six. We got when Jacob worked. He worked 7 years, and there's no evidence directly in the scriptures as to when he actually started, but I would not be surprised if he actually started working for Laban in the first year of a new Shemitah cycle. It's not. He may not have, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. In any case, he worked 7, and then in the 8th year, after he had completed 70, in the 8th, he received his wife. Now we don't know exactly when, but remember, Laban said, "See her week through, and then I'll give you the other daughter." So, but it was the Shabuah. So was it a hint that that whole event actually took place at the time of Feast of Weeks, Shabuah, at the time of Feast of Shabuah? And I suspect that is the case, that Jacob receiving his wives was linked to this Feast of Shabuah in the 8th year, which is exactly where we are right now. The 8th year in terms of the 21-year cycle, but the first year in terms of the 14-year cycle, the first year of the next 7. So 7 complete, and we're in the beginning of the next 7. And then, of course, we see this about an 8th linked to Luke 9:28. We see that in the Transfiguration story. Let's just go there quickly. In Luke 9:28, we see that this is a prophetic event that took place, the Transfiguration in Luke. The differences in the Gospels. We see that Luke 9:28 in the configuration in the Transfiguration story. This is where the Transfiguration story comes in, and it said, "And it came to pass about in 8 days after these sayings, he took Peter and John and James and went up into the mountain to pray." And then he prayed, and this was where he altered his raiment and was white and glistering. And behold, there was taken with they talked with him 2 men, which were Moses and Elijah. So that's the Transfiguration story in Luke, and it says about in 8 days we have this going up into the mountain to pray in the Transfiguration story. Whereas in Mark, it's Mark 9, I think it's Mark 9:2, if I remember correctly. And it says in Mark 9:2, it says, after 6 days. So where it looks at after about in 8 days, and it's after 6 days, Jesus take with him Peter and James and John, and leaded them up into the high mountain apart by themselves, and was transfigured before them. So he goes, and so after 6 days they go up into the mountain. So we have this difference of 6 and 8. And then, of course, we've got Matthew, I think it's in 17:1, if I remember correctly. 17:1, and after 6 days, Jesus taketh Peter, James, and John, his brother, and bringeth them up into the high mountain apart, and he was transfigured before them. So there we have the Transfiguration. So it's similar to Mark. It's after 6 days, and so we've come to understand that is a prophetic understanding of the timing of the events of the 3 groups. The first group being the bride group linked to Luke, Then we've got the church group that's linked to Mark, and then the final group, the Jews linked to Matthew. So if we have a look at, we see we have, in terms of this picture, we have after about 8 days, okay, and then after 6 years. So from there it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. After 6, so we know that the rapture will happen. Yeah, this will be the rapture after 6. And then we count, and then we in Matthew it's again, it's after 6. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we know that this is the final Armageddon and the restoration of all things in the 14th year. So we see this pattern, and that's where we're at the moment. So there's so many things pointing to this particular time right now. We have Daniel saying Feast of Weeks, Feast of Shabuah, 15 of them, and then to the anointing of the Most Holy. So this is what I wanted to just show you in this diagram, the counting of those. If we mark on here, if this is where we are at the moment, and this little green star represents the Feast of Weeks or the Feast of Shabuah, okay, and it'll be in this time period where we are now, about July. So I just, in terms of the year, I just put a marker there. So if we count off, if there's one every single year, okay, at about the same time. So Daniel said there would be 15 of these, okay. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And there we see the 15th one is right in that Jubilee year, and probably will be the time when Jesus will be anointed and crowned as king for his millennial reign. Will happen probably at Feast of Weeks, 15th or 16th of the 3rd month in that year of 2039, in the Jubilee year. And that would be the conclusion of the Daniel prophecy in terms of the end time understanding. And that still encompasses 14 years. Okay, so if we count the gaps, yeah, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14 years, but 15 Feast of Weeks, 15 Shabuah. So it was just the way the wording. So we see that that is where I believe Daniel is. Let's go back to Daniel. So Daniel 9:24, the 70 Shabuah, and we see that from this command. So the thing that triggers this whole thing, and this is where I'm at the moment. I believe that if it's true, if my understanding is correct, and this Shabuah, this Feast of Weeks, is the beginning, then in this week, and we know that this is in this week, if we go to the calendar, there it is there, it's the 11th of July, okay, and we're here. So if it's going to be this year, and it's possible that it might only be next year, Feast of Weeks, but if it is this year, then in this week, somewhere here, we should see two things happening. Well, the one thing that we should be seeing is some sort of the first thing we should be seeing is some sort of decree, or maybe an announcement for the temple to be rebuilt. I believe something along those sort of lines, for the rebuilding of the temple. Some sort of declaration to rebuild the temple will happen in this coming week, before Friday. The second thing that we must understand must be the transgression of astonishment, or the transgression of desolation, which is in Daniel chapter 8, which is connected to the ending of the daily. And I'm going to show you now, that's the ending of the daily I believe, is the ending of the daily prayers at the Western Wall. So I want to get into that particular thing, but we know that that in terms of the Daniel prophecy, it's the trigger is the command, the from the know that understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem unto Messiah, and that trigger would be the triggering the 7, 6, and 2, which is the 15. So the trigger would be some sort of command to rebuild, and so that's what I'm kind of hoping will go down. And if that happens, oh boy, that's going to be super exciting. Then we'll know, then we'll know that this understanding is correct, and then I'm expecting the bride to be taken somewhere on the 11th of July, if that's the case, if that happens. The second thing that we might also want to see is now I'm going to get into Daniel, what he said in terms of the events, so leading up to this time. So that's all in Daniel chapter 7 and 8. Okay. In Daniel chapter 7, we have the story of the four beasts that rise up out of the sea, where the first beast is the lion, the second beast is the bear, and the third beast is the leopard, and then we have this great and terrible beast that rises out of the sea, and then we have some interpretation of those things. Okay, so I'm going to go into that, but that's Daniel chapter 7, and then we got Daniel chapter 8, which is now he received. So he received this in the first year of Belshazzar, and and then this one he received in the third year of Belshazzar. So it would have been 3 years later. Okay, about 2.5 to 3 years later. And this is the vision that's referred to with everything that I understand. This is to bring in this to seal up the vision. This is the vision that's referred to in sealing up the vision in Daniel, in that Daniel 9 20, I think it's in 24, 25, 26, seal to seal up the vision. Where is it? To seal up the 24, and to seal up the vision and prophecy. That is to seal up this vision and prophecy. This Daniel 9, Daniel 8. This vision. He received this vision. He saw a vision because, and we'll see now. This is a very important, and this is also the vision where chapter 8, where it talks about the ending of the daily, and from the time at the end of the daily to the cleansing of the sanctuary is 2,300 days, or evening and mornings, not just days, evening, mornings. Okay, so I want to go into the bit of detail on these on Daniel 7 and 8 now, because I think this is exactly. I think this is connected to what we're seeing at the moment in the Middle East. And to understand what's happening in the Middle East, we need to understand this. Okay, so let's get started on this one. All right, so he gets this vision, and he just, so as I mentioned, he sees the four beasts coming out of the sea, and they were different from each other. First is like a lion, and he has eagle wings. And he beheld until the wings were plucked off, and then he gets to stand up like a man on his feet, and he's given a man's heart. Okay, this is clearly was in the original understanding. This would have been Nebuchadnezzar, the lion, at the time of the head, the golden head. Of course, this is linked to the statue, the golden head, the shoulders of silver, the torso of bronze, and the legs of iron, is linked to these same four beasts. Okay, that's a different way of that it was given. I'm not going to go into that too much, but this was obviously linked to that. And when we do, let me just say this at this point in time. To understand all of these things in greater detail, I'm not going to be able to go and explain everything. I'm going to tell you who they are and in terms of the understanding. But where I get the understanding from is obviously important. It's not just me sucking it up from nowhere. So I would highly recommend that you have a look at. There's a. Let me just get this here. There's a video. This is my channel, okay. Ivan S128. You'll find it on YouTube there, and there are several videos here on the beasts. If you want to understand the beasts, you need to go and have a look at these two videos here. This one, it's this one first. Let me just bring that up. Okay. This goes into the beast, the lion, the bear, the leopard, and how they all come together they amalgamate into a terrible beast. So each one of these is a part of this terrible beast, and I'll go into detail of who these are. In terms of the wars, we obviously know that was Nebuchadnezzar. This was the Medes and the Persians. This was Darius and Cyrus, and then later on this was the leopard. That was Alexander the Great. And then this would have been the Roman Empire in terms of what happened in the wars. Okay, we're talking about Ecclesiastes 1:9. What that which was shall be, that which is shall be. Okay, so we're looking at what was and what is, we know shall be. Ecclesiastes 1:9. So if to understand what's coming, we need to understand what happened in the past. And these things all lead us to understand who these what the end time understanding is of this prophecy. I believe that this prophecy also has a dual meaning, a dual understanding, a dual timing in terms of what happened in the past and what's happening right now and going into the future. Okay, so this video goes into the detail of this and how it links into these statues, and we go into all the areas and the countries involved and all those kind of things. Okay, so this in the original understanding, this would have been Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. This would have been Persia, the Persian Medes and Cyrus and that, and this would have been Alexander, and then of course later on the Roman Empire going forward. In this new end time understanding, I believe that this would be Assyria. This would be Assad, and that's come and gone. He's already, his wings have been plucked off. He's been made to stand up like a man. He's been given a heart of a man. I think there's definitely a connection there to that. This bear, in the end time understanding, is not Russia. It is Persia. It is Persia with the one shoulder higher than the other. It's speaking about, it's similar to the ram that's mentioned in Daniel, in the next chapter, Daniel chapter 8, with the two horns, where the one is higher than the other. But this is Persia. This is showing us with the three ribs in its mouth. That is the three proxies: Hamas, Hezbollah, and Yemen. The three proxies in its mouth, and they're told to devour much flesh. So this, I believe, has already happened. It's come and gone. This is just finished. Then the leopard is about to come on the scene for the end time understanding. I believe this leopard, with everything that's in my heart, it is Turkey. I believe that we will see Erdogan coming to the fore, and I believe he will probably even take out he is the one-horned goat. I do believe he's the one-horned goat. Although there's also the possibility, because the one-horned goat is linked to this leopard as well, in the one-horned goat of Daniel 8. We'll have a look at it now. But the one-horned goat that takes out the ram, which is Persia, could also be the West, could be Trump, and that might have already happened. So we'll have a look at that briefly. But there's a possibility that it might actually be Turkey as well. I'm thinking that that's will be more likely the case, but we'll see. There's a timing issue, of course, because of course these things will happen very, very quickly from here on. To get to the point where they all come together. The reason why I say this, Erdogan, is he's a guy that really, for many, many years, he's been wanting to establish the Islamic Caliph. He's wanted to bring back the Ottoman Empire, which was an Islamic caliph that came to an end at World War just after World War One, and he would like to see it re-established. If ever there was a person that would be motivated to take out the ram and establish a caliph, now that they are weakened by Israel and USA, I think it'll be him. And he may even be approached by the people of Israel of Iran to do exactly that, to help them take out the current regime that's there. So and then of course he won't be on the scene for very long after that, and then he will die, and four leaders will come out, and one of those will be the little horn that then comes to the fore in the Daniel prophecies. So I'd highly recommend, you want the detail of that, go through that video there. And then of course the other one would be going into Revelations, would be this one here, taking the story further, those beasts going forward into Revelations would be this video here. And while I'm on these videos, the Daniel 70 weeks, there's also 2 videos on the Daniel 70 weeks, the 2 interpretations, the interpretation of the 490 years, and then the interpretation of the 70 years. That's these 2 videos here, besides the study that's in the Google Drive folder as well. These 2 videos that you can have a look at. It goes through the same teaching, but in much more detail, of more than what I can do tonight. Okay, so yeah, so let's get back to the Daniel prophecy. So we've got the lion, I believe was Assad and Assyria. Then another one was the second one was like a bear. It had 3 ribs in its teeth, and I've explained that already. And then of course the leopard, which has the 2 wings of a fowl. It's not an eagle's wings, it's a fowl's wings, like a bird's wings, and he has 4 heads, so he splits up into 4. So there's that, and then this terrible beast that now rises out of them, I believe, is that caliph that they will start to build. Although Erdogan wants to do it, he will start it, but he won't complete it. The little horn that rises up out of those that comes to the fore, he's the one that'll actually take this Islamic caliph, and this terrible beast will comprise all these countries in the Middle East, Islamic countries, and it'll be an Islamic caliph. And I suspect very, very strongly at this point in time that it will be Hamza bin Laden. Would be Osama bin Laden's son, who was believed to have been killed, but I don't think he has been. He operates in the shadows, and he's been pulling the strings in the Middle East to a large extent, and I think he will come to the fore. I strongly suspect Hamza bin Laden will be that little horn, which goes on to say, and after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, it was dreadful and terrible and strong and exceedingly, and was great, and iron teeth, and it devoured, and it breaks into pieces and stamps the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse, was different from the other beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns, which of course is the 10 countries around Israel, Islamic countries around Israel that would seek to destroy it. And that's all in that video. And I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom 3 of them, of the first horns, were plucked up by the roots. And behold, this horn, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and mouth that spoke great things. So that's that little horn that comes to the fore. So I put it in the color there, so you can see that's the orange is the terrible beast, and little horn connected to that. Then Daniel goes on to say that now he says I beheld, he watched until the thrones was cast down, or set down, placed down. Okay, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and his hair and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was like fiery flame, and the wheels as burning fire. So this is the throne room. Obviously, this is Jesus in his throne room, and the thrones are set down. and a fire stream goes forth from the throne before him. 1,000 ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and judgment was set, and the books were opened. So he watched up until this event. So now I really believe that, well, this is so strongly connected to Revelations, to the description of Jesus in Revelations chapter 1 for a start, because it speaks about Jesus with pure white wool hair, and it speaks about the flames and the throne and all that type of thing, and the throne's been set down. And then it also speaks about, we know that the book is opened, the seals are broken, and so we also know that in Revelations chapter 5 we got the 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands standing before him. So there's so many things that are connected, and that is the beginning of judgment, where the seals are opened up. So this seems to be putting a timing to these things. So we see that this beast starts coming to the fore, and we have this Revelations chapter 4 being described here. Revelation chapter 4 going into Revelation chapter 5. So I've put that in purple. That's just a time stamp in the whole sequence of events here. And then he continues with the terrible beast. He says, I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake, and I beheld even until the beast was slain, and the body destroyed and given to the burning flame. So this was through the whole time of seals. This is the beast of Revelation chapter 13, and he's destroyed ultimately by the end of the sixth seal. Or at the time of the sixth seal, he's destroyed and thrown into the flames, into the bottomless pit. So we have this interjection of time, and then he continues and completes the story so that it goes right to the end. So we see this is definitely a time of events leading up to the beginning of seals to the end of seals. Okay. And then it just goes on to say concerning the rest of the beasts. Okay, their lives were prolonged for a time and a season, so they weren't completely destroyed at the time that the beast is destroyed, but they're involved in the time of trumpets. After seals comes trumpets, and there's some involvement of these other 10 horns during the time of trumpets. Okay, then it goes on to say now this is now the link to Jesus again, and the elect that work with him. And I saw by night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him, and there was given to him a dominion and glory and a kingdom, and all the people of the nations and the languages which serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. So obviously this is now speaking, leading into, from the beginning and into the millennial reign at the end of the 14 years of tribulation. Okay, the receiving his kingdom there. So that's is taking us to the full end of the picture. So it's starting off the beginning. These beasts arising, which I believe we've seen some of them happening already. The terrible beast is coming on the scene now. We will about to see the horn coming up, and then he complete, and it'll lead us into ultimately the millennial reign. So Daniel didn't understand all of this thing. He was aggrieved, and and the visions troubled him, and so he came near unto one that stood and asked him the truth of all this. So, and that angel told him, and made him know the interpretation. Now this is the interpretation. Okay, so in yellow, this is obviously linked to the first three beasts. These great beasts, which are the four kings which arise out of the earth. Okay, so that's four kings or four kingdoms. This is a really broad summary. So the four kingdoms, then the saints will prevail and shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever. So they will ultimately win. And then I would so it's a very two verse summary of the whole beginning and end. Okay, there's the beginning, the four beasts coming, and the end is the millennial reign, ultimately Jesus will win and those that are with him. Then he goes on to, and he said, I wanted to know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from the others and exceedingly dreadful, whose teeth were of iron and nails of brass, which devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with his feet. So he's just repeated of what he saw in the vision, and the 10 horns that were on that were in his head, and of the other which came up before, whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth and spake great things, who spoke, whose look was more stout than his fellows. Okay, so he's just repeating what he saw in the vision. Okay, and he wanted to understand. And I beheld, and the same horn was made war with the saints and prevailed over them. So this horn deals, and that links to that time of the beast, Revelation 13 beast, that basically overcomes the saints during the time of seals, and he prevails against them. And that goes on until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints and the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. So there's the end of it again. So we're given an overall summary. The end result is given to us again. I've put colors in so you can see the connections between how the story is repeated in layers. Okay, and thus now is the interpretation. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all the kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. We've now seen the third time that this is really being stressed about what this terrible beast is going to do. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are the 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after him, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 of them. So it's pretty clear. The one that comes up, this little horn that comes up, that becomes prominent, given a voice, and he osts 3 of the 10, and they become 8. Because 10 minus 3 is 7, plus himself, it's back to 8 again. So of the 10 ends up in being 8. And he will speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until times and the dividing of times, until a time and times and dividing of time. So that's a time, that's a year, and times, that's 2 years, and a dividing and a half. So 3.5 years. 1 plus 2 plus a half. That's 3.5 years. So for 3.5 years, he's going to have power over the saints, and we see that later on in the 42 months, where he's given power to continue. Revelations 13, the beast is given power to continue 42 months and to persecute the saints, etc. That will be the second half of seals. 42 months is 3.5 years, and this is just this time here as well. Same, it's connected. And then again we see, but the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, and to consume and destroy it even unto the end. So he's explaining again what was given in the vision. He will end up in the lake of fire, and the kingdom and the dominion of the great and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people and the saints and the Most High, whose kingdom is everlasting kingdom, and all the dominions shall serve and obey him. So there we see a repeat of the coming millennial reign. And that's the end of the matter. And he kept it in his heart. And that was an overview of what's going to happen. So we've got these. But so when did this actually happen? Is this for the end, or is this something that's already come and gone? And I think there's enough evidence here that there's a bit of both. It has happened to an extent, but we're going to see a similar pattern of events coming again. The next chapter makes it much clearer that we're going to see this. This is definitely going to happen again. That the picture that we've given in Daniel 7 will help us to understand Daniel 8. So let's go into Daniel 8. This was given to him 3 years later, and he saw in a vision, and it came to pass, and he was in Susan. That Susan is in Elam, which is in the southern part, western part of Iran, Elam. and he was given a vision. He was in his vision. He was in that place, okay, by the river Ulai, and he sees in the vision over there. He sees there stood by the river a ram which had two horns, and the two horns were high, but the one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. So we have the situation in Iran now. I believe with everything in me, we're told that this is Persia, the media Persia. In the interpretation later on, Gabriel, the angel, he actually interprets this for him, and he tells Daniel that this is Persia. Of course, this would have been the happened at the time in the was, but there is evidence in this chapter that this is also for the time of the end. So we see the situation in the current Islamic regime that's there. We have a double leadership. We've got the supreme leader, and then we've got the prime. I think they call him the prime minister. Supreme leader is higher than the prime minister, and that's the way they rule. But as it is there at the moment, the supreme leader has been in far longer than the prime minister. The prime minister came in, I think it's about a year ago or so. Maybe it's a year and a half ago. Time flies so quickly. But the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, has been there for several years now. And yet, we see here that at the time when this ram is taken out and the two horns are broken, that the higher had actually come up last. So I think what we should be seeing there is that Khamenei will be replaced very shortly by a new supreme leader, and then the two horns will be broken. So that's what I'm watching for over there. Because he went and he saw that the ram was pushing westward and northward and southward, and no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, and he did according to his will and became great. Okay, that's already happened. We've seen what's happened with Iran. And then he considered, and behold, a he-goat that came from the west, and on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Now, this is later on we're told that this goat is from Grecia, and we'll go into a little bit of who that potentially could be, because Grecia is a little bit more cryptic than Persia Media. We know it's definitely Iran, but Grecia, where it's a little bit more cryptic as to who that could be. But anyway, this one-horned goat, he comes to the ram, and that had two horns, and that he had seen before the river, and he ran into him with the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler, with anger, with bitterness against him, and smote the ram and brake his two horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. And he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver him out of his hand. So this is what I've been trying to debate. Is this what has just happened with regards to the battle between Israel and then USA coming in over the air, through the air, without touching the ground, and basically stamping on him, and he had no power. The Israelis had taken the power out of him already. He had no ability to withstand what the US, and is the US Trump the one-horned goat from the West? I think there's a very strong possibility. The problem that I'm having is that if it's happened already, why is it that Khamenei is still there, and and yet we have this clear indication that the higher one came up last. So I'm a little bit doubtful that what we've seen is the actual end of the story with regards to this, and the actual it might be a lead up and a preparation. I think, in fact, what's happened is they've weakened the ram to the point where the one-horned goat will have a power over him, and he's unable to stand because of what's been done to him already. He won't be able to resist, and that's why I still think that Turkey could be it, and I think it'll be the bitterness, or he wants to bring about a caliph. It's interesting that recently he's just started arresting and putting into jail some of his political rivals, and they're starting to show signs of him wanting to become a little bit more powerful in the Middle East. So that, together with people from Iran, might actually ask him to help them take the current regime out of the way, and So everything in me is pointing to Turkey being the goat, but it is possible that we've already had this fulfilled. It's there's just this one thing, this Kameni thing that is still there. I believe it should have been replaced or before the horns are taken out. Anyway, so that's something to watch. We're watching very carefully what's happening over there. It goes on to say that therefore the he goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, he was broken, one was broken, and out of that came four notable warns towards the four winds of heaven. So whoever this is, if it's Trump, is about to be taken out, and if it's Turkey, then Erdogan will be taken out ultimately, and there'll be four to replace him, and one of those four will be that little horn that comes up. So we saw in the terrible beast of Daniel chapter 7. So out of one of them came forth the little horn, which waxed exceedingly great towards the south and towards the east and towards the pleasant land, waxed great even to the host of heaven. In other words, pointed through his fist at Jesus, and it cast down some of the host of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. That would be those that are walking with Jesus. He magnified himself even to the Prince of Hosts, and by him the daily sacrifice, not the sacrifice, the sacrifice in italics. So by him the daily was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Now this is, you remember I mentioned to you that the first trigger we need to see for these 15 Shabua was the command to rebuild Jerusalem, and I think it'll be more like a command to rebuild the temple. And then we also have the second thing is this daily this okay, yeah, it doesn't say when it'll happen, but it just says this little horn will be the one that stops the daily. So I think what we can know for certain, whoever stops, well, not for certain, but I do believe everything that's in me, wherever we see stopping the daily prayers at the Western Wall, the sanctuary, which is all I got left at the moment, he will by that action will identify him as the coming beast, Revelation 13 beast, and the little horn of Daniel 7 and 8. So he takes away the daily, and then later on a host is given to him, an army is given to him, and against the daily. So it seems like he takes away the daily, but there's resistance, and they continue trying to have prayers at the Western Wall, but he's given an army, because by reason of transgression, and cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. So that's now a military force taking place. So it's two phases of the daily being taken away. First, initially just taking it away and placing at the place of the sanctuary, and then later on the more military approach to the whole thing. Okay, now this is the important part here, because then I heard one saint speak to another saint, saying unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily, and the transgression of desolation, or the transgression of astonishment? Okay, take note of this word, H8074. H8074. It is to desolate, applaud, but it also means astonish. It's later translated as to bring, to desolate, therein shall be astonished. It's translated, it shall be astonished, shall be astonishment. So you can see that there's astonished, astonishment. So it's between desolate and astonishment. It's been translated astonished and desolate. They were astonished, and he says you can. So it's between those two. So we have this desolation and astonishment. The transgression of desolation, or the transgression of astonishment, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot. So how long shall it be from the time that the daily is put away, okay, or stopped, and for this time, this period of time when the sanctuary will be trodden underfoot. And then he gives the answer, and he says, and he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So we're given a time period from when the daily is put an end, and then there's trotting underfoot for 2,300 days, and then the sanctuary is cleansed, and it's all linked to that Western Wall situation, I believe. So I want to just show you something very interesting. This 2,300 days is about 6 years and 4 months, and so I went and had a look in the calendar, and I'll just show you. And I'm not saying this is the case, but if I'm right, and we're about to see something in this week, where's that calendar? If we're about to see something in this week, and we take 2,300 days from this time period, in fact, I'll just tell you straight out. If we take 2,300 days from this day here, from this Wednesday, the 14th day of the third month, which is the day before the Sabbath in this week, and we add 2,300 days, it brings us to the 26th of October 2031. And the 26th of October on what I believe to be the true biblical calendar, this is now the same calendar, this is 2031. The 26th of October will be the Day of Atonement. And so 2,300 days from this week, Wednesday. So is it, if it happens that we see the daily being brought to an end in this week, then I believe that will be confirmation for me that that's the beginning of the 2,300 days, and that will be super exciting. So what's the chance of both of those things happening? There's some sort of declaration about the temple being rebuilt in this week, and then within a day or two after, some sort of rioting or something happening where those daily prayers are put to an end, and that will be confirmation of these events. And then if that happens, oh my goodness, then 7-Eleven is going to be a super duper day, I do believe. Feast of Weeks, and being the first of the 15 of Daniel's 15 Shabuah, Feast of Weeks. So that's the main of what I wanted to share with you guys, because man, that is so super. This may or may not happen, and if it does, oh my goodness, it's going to be super good. All right, let's just see if we can finish this. Okay, this was the interpretation. Let's go through the interpretation in Daniel 8. We'll continue because there's some more. This is now. He said, "Behold, I will make thee know and know what shall be in the." Okay, this was important. This is why I say Daniel 8 is for the time of the end. So this is now Gabriel, eh? Yeah, you see over here. Let's go back a bit. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of that river Ulai, where he received the vision, and which called and said, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. Okay, obviously Jesus, whoever, told Gabriel, go and explain the whole thing to him. So he came near. So Daniel came there and he stood, and when he had came, I was afraid and fell on my face, and he said unto me, understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Okay, remember we saw that it was in Daniel 9:24. One of the things was to seal up the vision, and this is the time of the end will be shall be the vision. And now he was speaking with me, and in a deep sleep. I was in a deep sleep on my face towards the ground, but he touched me, and and set me upright. Okay, he woke me up, and he said unto me, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. Remember, we saw for yet the reconciliation for indignation, and for the time appointed, the end shall be. Now, this is the time appointed. This is the Modim. Okay, so the time appointed. We know that the Modim is the appointed times. And Feast of Weeks is one of the appointed times, only one of the appointed times. So we know that this end will be at one of the appointed times. No debate about it in my view. Then he goes on to explain. So he gives a bit of a timing issue, and then he says, okay, then the ram which I saw with two horns are the kings of Media Persia. So that's clearly in today's times, Iran. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. Now this Grecia is Javan. Javan, which was the son of Joseph, and it's really talking about the east. It's translated Greece. Greece would be where we see the area where Alexander the Great came from was Turkey. That whole area, the descendants of Javan. And that whole area of where Turkey is now is that area that we're in. So I do believe that this Grecia is that Turkey, and the great horn is that is between the eyes is the first king. So obviously in the wars it was Alexander the Great, but in these end times I believe it's got something to do with Turkey. We'll see. Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, and the four kingdoms shall stand out of the nation, but not in his own power. And in the latter time of the kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding, dark sentence shall stand up. So I think this is really just pointing to, when you understand who Grecia is, and that it's Alexander the Great, and that he died and four came out of it, and in the latter time, out of that area where Alexander came from, that's where the little horn will come from. And in his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy mighty and the holy people. It's talking about the little horn again. And through his policies he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace he shall destroy many, and he shall stand up against the prince of princes, and he shall be broken without hand. So that's his end conclusion. It's the whole story again in different words. He will stand up, magnify, he will destroy the people of the Lord, the saints, the Christians, but ultimately he will be broken and he will be destroyed. And then it goes on to say, and this is important, the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true. Now this vision is which vision? It's the vision of the evenings and the mornings, which is the 2,300 days. The 2,300 days is described here, which shall be told, therefore shut up thy vision, and for it shall be for many days. So the vision of the evening and the mornings, which was told, is true. Therefore shut up the vision, for it shall be for many days. So it's clearly telling us this thing is linked to the end times. 3 times we're told that this is for the time of the end. There's some that argue that this 3,200 days is 3,200 years. But that doesn't fit this picture, because it says here that the vision of the evenings and the mornings. It's just interesting. This word evening, morning, this 6153, and the morning 1242. So 6153 and 1242. I'll just let me just show you something. Okay, 6153 and 1242. Let's go and search for that. First time that it comes up, Genesis 1:5, and God called the day, the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning the first day. 6153 H1242. So I have great difficulty with that idea that the 3,200 is related to years. It's evening and mornings, it's days, and it's linked to right from the beginning, Genesis, right throughout all these Genesis, the evening, morning, all of them are 6153 H1242. I just thought that was interesting. So I'm fairly convinced that this vision, which was said to be true, and then, in conclusion, and I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterwards, I rose up and did the king's business and was astonished. There's that word, H6074, the one that's used for desolation. He was astonished at the vision. If we see this H8074 relating to the abomination, the transgression of abomination, or the transgression of astonishment, and the vision, and Daniel is astonished at the vision, is sick days. Something really, really bad happens during those 2,300 days. That's what I believe. That's really, I have some ideas. I've explained that in greater detail of what I believe is actually talking about. Revelations 14 gives us a clue as to what's going to be happening during those 2,300 days, I do believe. And I explained that in. So if you want to get to understand that, go and read the end, towards the end of that study. Daniel's 70 weeks. This one, yeah. At the end here, Daniel's prophecy of 2,300 days. So that would be from page 25. You can go and you can decide whether you agree with me or not. I explain what I believe to be the true understanding of that, what will be happening during those 2,300 days. I think that's pretty much what I wanted to get through in this particular video. I will share links to all of these to these studies. I'll put the calendars. Also, I'll put links to the calendars as well. It'll be a folder with all the calendars in it. You can go to the particular year that you want. They all look the same. It gives the year that it's relevant to at the top there. They laid out, they structured, the feast days are marked there. So if you want to have a look at that, have a look at the study, understand and scrambling the calendars, explains exactly how that calendar came about, how we came to that understanding. And then this will also be up. This just explains the events, and it just links the different parts of Revelations. All those, like for example, the 42 months. And the 42 months, which was mentioned twice. It's 42 months in Revelation 11:2, and there's 42 months in Revelation 13:5, and how they coincide. They're just two mentioned twice related to a particular time period, which is the second half of the 7 years of seals. Just out of interest, that 2,300 evenings and mornings would start, if it does start now, as what I believe it would be, just before Feast of Weeks. That takes us to the end exactly, to the end of the 7 years, to the end of the time of seals. Exactly 2,300 days. Where I showed you from the 9th of July to the Day of Atonement in 2031. Day of Atonement would be in. We saw that it was 26 October. So it brings us to the end of this 7 year cycle exactly. Then during the time of trumpets, we've got all these events, and also we've got the days. We've got the 1,260 days. The time when the woman is in a place prepared for her. That'll be in the land of Israel, in Jerusalem. And then, of course, then Satan is released, and we have the war. That'll be for 2.5 years, which is approximately 900 days, and ending in the Battle of Armageddon. So I don't have the time now to go through to all of this in great detail. I don't think I've done a video on this chart. I may actually do one day. I don't know. I'll see. but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It just lays out, there are references to the chapters for the time slots. Just one last interesting thing in. We know that it's 1,260 days, and that will be also the time when the two witnesses will witness for 1,260 days. That's in the same time period. And then we've got this in the abomination of desolation in Daniel 12:11. We've got a time period. There's two abominations of desolation. There's one that happens at the beginning of seals, and then there's another one that happens in the middle of trumpets. And this abomination is the trigger for the 2,300 days, but the next one is the trigger for the 1,290 days. And so if you take, and then there's another 45 days. So it says in Daniel 12:12, blessed are those that get to the 1,335 days. So it's 1,290 plus the 45 days gives you a total of 1,335 days. And if you add that to the 1,260 days, you get a total of 2,595 days, which is exactly 7 years. So from there to the end is 2,595 days, comprising of 1,260 plus the 1,290 plus the 45, and that's exactly the 7-year period in Revelations. So just some interesting stuff there to have a look at. Yeah, I think, guys, I'm not sure how long I've been on this video. I don't want to make it too long. I hope that you guys, that it blesses you. We'll be watching this week closely, and if nothing happens, well, we'll just carry on watching, and we'll see what happens. And that's what the scriptures are saying, and we'll soon see if that interpretation is correct. And the Lord bless you and keep you, and hope to see you guys all soon on the mountain. Amen.